Hello there, right here, and what you see behind me is the first 1.17 AFK fish farm using the Skulk sensor that works flawless and gives you the treasure loot. And remember to find the latest changes to these farms, as well as more simple farms you could do in survival. Check out the playlist down in the description. When you go fishing, there's 3 different categories of loot that you can get. You can get junk, which is stuff like lily pads, bowls, fishing rod, leather boots, rotten flesh, sticks, string, water bottles, bones, ink sacs, tripwire hooks, and if you're in a jungle biome, also bamboo. Next category is the fish category. This consists of raw cod, raw salmon, tropical fish, and pufferfish. But all that normal fish loot can be obtained just by having a simple AFK fish farm like this, where you aim on the edge of this pressure plate, and you hold down right click, and as soon as the fish will nibble, your bobber will go down, releasing the pressure plate, allowing you to pull in the bobber, and then it'll automatically reset all by itself. But to get the treasure loot, which is stuff like nautilus shells, saddles, name tags, enchanted bows, enchanted fishing rods, and even all the different types of enchanted books, you need to make sure that your bobber is considered in open water. This makes automating the process much more difficult. But after about 20 hours of testing with the newest Skulk sensor, we made this AFK farm, which player can sit in here and automatically obtain all the treasure loot as well as the other categories. The machine itself is a bit more complicated than that little one over there, but well worth it as the loot is so nice to have. This farm uses a lot of cool mechanics, and in my last video I talked about different ways we could possibly get treasure AFK fishing to work. This was the design that I showed. And this one works by having the player pull in the bobber after a certain amount of time, plus the bobber producing a splashing event. In the last video, I messed up the math where I said the splashes occur about every 16 game ticks when they really occur around every 24 game ticks. So thanks everybody who corrected my math there. You guys also suggested instead of trying to detect when the bobber splashes, try to detect when it's not splashing, as when the bobber goes down into the water, like when it's down underneath, it's technically not putting off any splash events because that can only occur when the bobber is above the water and then touches the water. And we did just that during our testing stream, which is this thing right here. If you guys didn't know, I stream 4 times a week, and we even have a stream where the viewers can join me on this testing world as we play around with the latest 1.17 snapshot. Make sure you're following me over there, as well as have your bell notifications turned on so you don't miss out on those fun events. So the way this works is when the bobber reaches the water, it's going to send off a splash to this bottom one. Then after a short period of time, we open it up so that the middle one can detect it, and then we let the top one detect it. So they kind of turn on at different times, and this way we can detect when the bobber gets pulled down. The bobber gets pulled way down, all 3 of them should turn off, or at least 2 of them should turn off, and we can detect this and determine when there is a fish on there. But because the splashing can occur as long as 24 game ticks, a fish can nibble as short as 20 game ticks, you only really detect the fish nibbles that pull the bobber down for longer than 1.5 seconds. We also did some other testing, like having these really OP fishing rods. This is Luck of the Sea Enchantment 255. With Lure 5, which when you throw this into the water, it makes it so a fish will bite really fast and often, and you can also see that every time you pull it in, you will only get a treasure loot, so every single time. We also played around with the luck effect. By giving yourself a really high luck effect, you can also get treasure loot every single time, even from a ordinary fishing rod like this one instead of enchanted. Right there you see I got a nautilus shell. This is one of the few cases where the luck effect can play a role in survival. I normally can't get this in survival, but I did show that it's possible to get it during a 1.14 snapshot by purchasing arrows from a Fletcher villager. And while fishing with these super OP fishing rods, we noticed something strange, that when you be fishing in a bubble column and you got a fish nibble, there you go. You see when I reel it in, I get nothing. And you should always get something when you're fishing. We figure out because the enchantment is so high, meaning that the game would always try to give us the treasure loot if it's in an area that is not considered open water. Like right here, when the player would pull it in, the game can't give him the treasure loot because the requirements aren't met, which is a 5x5 of water that's too deep, plus a 5x5 of air above it that is too high. So therefore it just gives you nothing. So when we were fishing in the ascending bubble column, it meant that we weren't getting the open water requirements, even though it looked like everything was being done properly. And at the same time, Foxman was testing in the downward bubble columns with the magma blocks down below, and he was getting treasure loot when the bobber would be pulled down. So it wasn't to do with the bubble columns, and instead it had to do with the bobber's location. We noticed that the bobber was often out of the water, and it's very possible that when the fish bites and you reel it in, because it's mostly out of the water, it ends up not having the requirements for open water, and therefore you don't get those loots. So I had an idea of holding down the bobber with a boat. Boats have a collision. Unlike most entities, stuff can't really go through them. After trying a bunch of different boat heights, I found this height here and notice that it's in the ascending bubble columns, but when I get a nibble and it gets pulled down, you can see I did get a treasure loot. Now when fishing with a magma bubble column, the bobber is mostly under the water, so when it gets pulled down by the fish, it doesn't actually activate the Skulk sensor until it comes back up again and starts splashing. So notice how it gets pulled down, doesn't activate it, only if it comes back up to the surface. So that's not useful, but with the ascending bubble columns, the bobber is held up above the water at all times, and only when it gets pulled down does it actually contact the water, making the splash. I noticed that every time it gets pulled down by fish, it activates the Skulk sensor. I was so excited when I came across this. I was like, oh my goodness, we finally did it.
No blocks go.
Hey, I think we got working, guys. And if you guys would ever like to see the entire process of how we design and create these crazy machines, make sure to check out my Twitch VODs, which are archived videos of the streams. As everything on my YouTube channel, we design live, and you can see all the mistakes we make along the way. After about 20 hours of testing, we came up with this design here. One of the main differences between this type of AFK farm and the previous designs is that the player is actually underneath of the majority of the water. This is because the bobber has to come up from underneath to get caught underneath the boat. If you do F3 plus B, we can see the hitboxes of the entities, including the bobber and the boat. We also have the requirements for open water, which is the 5x5 of water that is 2 deep, and we have the 5x5 of air that is at least 2 deep. For the player to automatically send out the fishing rod and pull it back in, we're using the same trick as the other fish farm, which is player clicking on something that doesn't make him send out a fishing rod, and then briefly letting a different block come in contact, which the player can right click on. So if I'm right click on this and then I move to there, notice how if I switch over to this block, I can send the bobber out, but then if I switch back to this one very quickly, I can leave the bobber out. And that's what this trapdoor is doing, flicking fairly quickly to do that. The bobber then goes up and hits underneath the boat. To get the boats here, you can use a couple different setups. We initially use 3 boats stacked on top of each other. The boats are being held up by blocks outside of the 5x5 area, so not affecting the treasure loot. And then we stack them inwards until they get to the center. Lost XOR came up with a simple way to make the boats set like this, and I'll go ahead and set that up. I'll show you guys how to set it up. Got stairs above that. We have a wall right there. Then we'll have a boat over here. Make sure when you drop it, it lands onto the chain. Now you can align it with this wall and this wall here. So now it's right in there. Main thing is that the boat is sitting on top of the chain and not slipped into it. Because when the boats fall into water, they'll try to sit at a very precise water level, which allows them actually to clip through any blocks nearby. So with that boat in place, now you can put in this there, and you can place in a boat right there. And now you have to back this boat up until it falls onto the lower level of the stair. Okay, drop down, and now I switch into this corner here. Push up against this and that, like so. And now we can also not touch the boat and drop it down onto the other one. There. So now the boat's in the precise location. And when the player reels out, you see the bobber is perfectly set so that it's just above the water. When it gets pulled down, it activates the Skulk sensor. And that sensor is actually directly underneath of bobber. So if we go straight down here, 8 blocks down, we find the sensor. And also kind of surrounded in wool, that way it doesn't get interfered by anything except for what is right above it. You could put the sensor in some other areas, but I found this to be the nicest, so you don't have to worry about accidentally moving around going to activate it. So when the bobber goes down, it's going to make a splash. A Skulk sensor is going to activate, send out a pulse going through a monostable. Then we extend the pulse a little bit longer, and then it goes up to the trap door right here. That way it opens up for just long enough so the player can reel in and then reel back out again. You might need to adjust this time depending on the lag, if you're on a server or if you're on single player. Bobber gets aligned with this block here and then just floats to the top with the bubble columns pushing it. Notice how the items always kind of end up getting launched one direction. They always kind of get sent down this way and sent to the outside. What I have here is just a hole, so the water is flowing here and here, and then a hopper to pick up the loot and put it into your storage. Now the speed in which this farm works is not this fast. I gave my player the OP rod, so it's working really fast. So I'll show you guys how to run the farm. You just hop in this little tunnel underneath. We have some trapdoors to prevent the water from falling from above. We also got something down here to prevent water from washing out. In 1.17 you can use the rails. Then you get your fishing rod and you would be in survival and you just aim at this sign back here, holding right click, and then you do F3 plus T. And then when that comes up, lift up on your mouse and don't push any buttons. And now you'll see that it automatically held down whatever button was held down during that period, which is my right click button. Now you can just go AFK like this. You can, use Alt Tab to move over into a different window. So you can work on other stuff while this is going on automatically. Then when you're done, just click right click to stop it. And you can turn off this clock down here just by putting a lever somewhere here and powering it. The farm itself isn't too complicated to build up. One thing to keep in mind is that sometimes the loot do glitch backwards and will end up in this chest here. You can see how many we got, but not very often. And then rarely will they ever get shot kind of at an angle and end up like in this corner or in this corner. If you still want to pick up those items, you can add more of these little pull away waters. But to keep it cheap, you can start out just by using one hopper on this side because this is where the majority of the items end up. And then you can always add in more hoppers as you get the iron to do it. You can also build this out of whatever blocks you want to. I use glass just so we can kind of see what's going on, and these trapdoors can be any type. The build itself isn't too expensive. This trapdoor here does have to be iron though, and depending on how expensive a Skulk sensor is, because we currently don't know the recipe or how to obtain them, but it might be one of the more expensive items. But your biggest question probably will be, will this be nerfed before the full release of 1.17? Now the AFK fish farm does use all the mechanics that are intended. The splashing mechanic is part of the Skulk sensor, and that's what we're using. And the build itself isn't that easy to quickly build up compared to the little teeny AFK fish farms. It'll probably really come down to if the developers think it's too overpowered. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. I know a lot of people say that they don't even really use AFK fish farms just because villagers and getting books is so much nicer that way than fishing for them. And that was typically the main thing that people went for. If you'd like to see how to build this up block for block, I will provide the world download in the description as always. And you can check out all the other 1.17 farms that I have in this world. And if you'd like to see the videos going over those new farms, make sure to check out the link down in the description. There's tons of them like Lava Farm, Outer Snow Farm, Shulker Shell Farm, Copper Converter, Amethyst Farm, and now the 1.17 Fish Farm. As always, don't forget to leave a like on the video if you made it this far, as well as share this with others so they know that there is a new treasure AFK Fish Farm. I would like to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye!